Yeah, no, it was weird. Like, just I remember getting on that flight and being sat there, and at the time, I think the nearest player to me was 26, so it was an slightly older squad than what we get now. Just the nature of people coming to rugby later. Because a lot of the women in the UK at that point kind of came to rugby through university, so then developed into. For me, there was a lot of like kind of all of those connections, and it was a genuine like care for people to be better and to develop people. And I think that's kind of then lent itself to how I developed myself as a coach as well. It became really challenging. So you could see after COVID, a lot of these clubs were really struggling to find and get back into a space where they could continue, and unfortunately some of them didn't, and Worcester being one of them. So.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. You are now tuned in to the greatest of all time, the greatest of all time.
Welcome to the Rugby Swag Show. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Rugby Swag. My name is GiftTime Bailu, and this is the show where we make sure you don't lose stories and ignorance through news and interviews. We got a great show for you today. Great guest, Joanne Yapp, head coach for the Wallaroos, the Australia women's national 15 side. Man, this was literally one of the more interesting interviews I've done, because I learned so much, not just about like what's going on with Australia, but even what was happening in England, where Joanna was from. But before we even get started into talking about all of that, I'd please need you guys to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you can, like and comment as well. You know, every little bit continues to feed the channel and allows us to be able to grow and be able to be seen by those who need to see it. This is in and outside the rugby community. On top of that, if you guys could, send this to your friends. If they don't want to watch it, let them also be able to hear it. You can absolutely listen on any streaming podcast platform. That's Spotify, that's Apple Podcast, that is iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, that's YouTube Music, anything that is a major streaming platform. We're going to be there for you. We will be there. I'll be there. Ooh, ooh, ooh. And also where you can find us is on social media. You can find us at Rugby Swag Show on Instagram. You can find us at GiftTime Rugby on Facebook and Rugby Swag Show on Facebook. Also, can find us at GiftTime Rugby on TikTok, on YouTube, obviously, youtube.com/at GiftTime Rugby, and occasionally whenever we're streaming, you can find us on Twitch at GiftTime Rugby as well. And just make sure, look, we want to make sure that we have access. We access you everywhere we possibly can. Would be doing X, but currently we are incapable of doing that. So, in the meantime, look, I wanted to get into this interview. I want you guys to be able to listen. This was a great story. I learned a lot about Joanne, a lot about Australia, a lot about just the process of being able to get to where she is. Because, you know, a lot of these stories you think is cut and dry, especially in places that are traditional power rugby houses. And it's not. It's never as simple as you would think it is. It's never as accessible. It's never as at ease as you would think. But man, those journeys are still something to be wondered. So I really enjoyed this one. I hope you guys enjoy it too. And of course, if you guys enjoyed this episode, definitely check out some of our past episodes as well too. We got other interviews, other shows with news and information that we like to be able to make sure we're keeping you informed about. That is what is most important for us, maintaining that you are staying informed at all times. So I'm really happy to be able to be a part of this and to be able to be part of the experience. So without further ado, I'm not going to hold off any longer, except for we're going to have to get to these messages, take care of those that take care of us, of course, as the saying always goes. But I hope that you guys enjoy Joanne Yapp. Check it out.
Buckwheat is changing lives. My name is GiftTime Bailu. I'm here with Health Enhanced Foods, and I want to tell you about one of my favorite products on our shelves, buckwheat baking mix. Buckwheat is a seed that is incredibly nutrient and protein dense. But what makes it even more important,
That buckwheat baking mix
is absolutely gluten-free. A lot of times whenever people have buckwheat mixes, they actually even hold wheat inside of it. So you know it's not fully gluten. And if you're a person that is celiac or diabetic, or you're just really trying to be health conscious, it's not something that you want to have to worry about. What makes our buckwheat baking mix even more important is that it is versatile. You can use it for pancakes, you can use it for waffles, you can use it for making loaves of bread, you can make it for cupcakes. But what helps even more is that it is allergen free, it is nut free, it is dairy free, that there is no additional additives in it. There's no leavening there, so that if you want to be able to raise your bread, you can put in the baking powder yourself and get it fluffy. If you don't, you absolutely do not have to. You get the bread that you love without the cost to your health. You can absolutely find buckwheat baking mix at healthenhancedfoods.com. Absolutely check it out. Get your nostalgia back. Get back to eating and loving the way that you are, and absolutely get back to the energy that you know that you can get without having to destroy yourself. I'm looking forward to seeing you get it. Let's go.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Rugby Swag. We got a special guest for you today. Yo, she is a three-time Rugby World Cup participant, a former captain. She was Emily Scarrett before Emily Scarrett existed. She has been the head coach for Exeter. She was a backscorer for Worcester, but most importantly, she is now taking on not just a job, the calling of being the head coach and the first women's head coach, which is wild. So shout out the progression for the Australian Wallaroos women's national teams. I'm talking about Jo Yapp. Jo, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's nice to meet you.
It's a pleasure to meet you as well. Whenever you were, I like to always say, where I always realize people, and whenever you were first announced in December about being the new head coach, I thought it was very obvious. I was like, okay, you look at the resume and it makes sense, but the notion of it being the first women's head coach for the women's team is wild to me. Absolutely wild. But I love the fact of this era of rugby. I feel has almost created this like golden era for women's rugby, because we're seeing such an arc in development over the period of time. So whenever you get named, and then even now we got like the USA, Emily Bidwell being the only women's rugby coach for the women's sides for the Olympics, like this is like those eras where you say, oh man, this was history. I got to see history in the making. So that's my way of saying shout out to you, and an absolute honor for the accomplishments that you've been able to do up to this point.
Thank you. Thank you.
So before we get started, I always like to tell my guests, this is about the origin story. Every superhero has their origin story, and of course, for you, Jo, we need to know the question. All right. This is the one where it matters most. How did you first get started with rugby?
So I very first got started with rugby when I was about 12 years old. So did loads of other sports. But my family were, my brother played and my dad played. My sister also went on to play, but just went down to my local rugby club, which was Ludlow. Lived on Clee Hill. So went down to my local rugby club, absolutely loved it. Just the freedom of being able to run around with ball in hand, and just all the kind of the camaraderie that comes with playing rugby. Just really enjoyed it, and stayed there, and then moved to Worcester when I was 15, and basically played all my senior rugby at Worcester, which I loved. And that's where I got capped for England whilst I was at Worcester as well. So yeah, that's how I kind of first got into rugby. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, got you back.
Okay, Uh, to jump around from time to time now. I always say it's very interesting to me about the way that the culture of rugby works in places where rugby is prominent. And especially with women's rugby, as it's developed over time, how a lot of women, especially pre 2000, were able to introduce into the game itself. For you, obviously you have your family that adds as an interest piece, but like, was there a solid amount of women that were still available or girls that were available for you to play? Or were you one of those that were like, look, I'm gonna have to show my brothers that I'm about that life. All right, I'm about to show them what's up right now.
Well, there wasn't like girls rugby at that point. So my parents actually signed when I was 12 years old, signed off for me to play with a women's team. So I was playing with adults. And it was fine because it was a completely new team. So it kind of felt like everybody was in the same boat with regards to like learning a new sport. But yeah, I remember my parents signed and off I went and played with the women's team because at that point there wasn't the opportunity for girls in and around where I lived.
My goodness. I mean, hey, look, when they say you just jump headfirst into the water, sink or swim, they mean it. Oh, like with that in mind, like how did that shape up how much your vision of rugby moving forward? Because you're coming in young. It's already, even if it's amateur, like there's still adult strength versus a child. And you're still getting this variation of maturity levels, and you're being part of the youngest. Like for you, how did that kind of shape the way that you move forward playing as you got older?
Yeah, I think I wasn't very big, so obviously the main aim at that age was not to get caught. So just had to work really hard on my footwork to make sure that I wasn't getting hit. But I think for me, just the confidence that rugby gave me was I was really, really shy as a child. But the confidence that rugby and sport as I grew up gave me was huge, and the opportunities that rugby then gave me, because when I went to the World Cup in '98, I'd never been on an aeroplane. I'd never gone anywhere. So my first experience of flying and that kind of stuff and going to a new country was when I went to the '98 World Cup. So it was just all these experiences that I was able to get through the sport that I loved and have continued to get through this sport was incredible, and it just really helped me develop as a person.
I can imagine. I mean, like even at that, like how old are you for first World Cup? What, 19?
Yeah.
20? Something like that?
Yeah.
So like even the experience of not leaving England, where you're in a place, obviously the UK has its various amounts of countries, and within England itself, there's a lot of subcultures. But like that addition of experiencing cultural difference, like this isn't a variation of English. We're going completely different. How was that in terms of development? Because it's one thing to do it as a kid where you have slow adaptation, but like jumping out like that and then doing it on a stage where there's nothing but pressure. All right, building diamonds out of this.
Yeah. No, it was weird. Like, just I remember getting on that flight and being sat there, and at the time, I think the nearest player to me was 26. So it was an slightly older squad than what you'd get now. Just the nature of people coming to rugby later. Because a lot of the women in the UK at that point kind of came to rugby through university, so then developed into. But I was surrounded as well by a lot of teachers. And at the time I was doing my A-levels. So I remember being out there, and there'd be time set aside for me to go, and they would help me and study, and they'd be like, no, you need to go and do your work now and stuff. So I was trying to balance like my studies alongside sort of training for the World Cup as well. So yeah.
Good. Look, you had aunties on the team. That's what we like. You had aunties on the team. They said, "Hey, baby, you were not about to mess up we're not to let you mess up and fall off in school just to be able to play. All right, keep your priorities together. Be there." I love that. I love that. Like, I think that's especially when it comes to development. We all know that mentorship is absolutely necessary, but like to have that in a situation where very easily people could dismiss you, even if you made the team, could absolutely dismiss you and being like, "Yo, you're young. Yo, stay in your low place. Stay your lane." But for them to be like, "No, not only are you coming with us, we want you to maintain what you're already doing, and then we're going to continue to rise with us as opposed to behind us in a way." So,
Yeah.
I like
That was
that.
the nature of the squad at the time, and continue to be with rugby, is everybody wants to support you and look after you, and and that's kind of why I love the sport so much.
Oh man, I love that. I love that. So okay, so being that you did start young, and obviously you had, was your family World Cup national players as well, or did they just play within the club element itself, which I mean still basically is almost professional?
Yeah, so my brother was a professional player for a while, so and he did like representative stuff, age group stuff with England, and then he was, like I say, he was full time, so he was one of the first kind of cohort of players that went full time in England at the time, so into that professional era. So yeah, so he was playing, and my dad played like rugby socially.
Nice. Okay, so with that in mind, how much did they even help with the development and training on how to prepare for a game? Because obviously you have the team members, but like you said, it was still a fairly new team at that point whenever you entered in. How much did how much did your brother especially help with the process of getting you mentally prepared and then even physically prepared for a high level of play?
Yeah, so I remember that one of his first clubs was Bedford Blues, and he was full time there. And I remember a few times going down there and training with him and watching them train and stuff. And he used to come out and help me with my kicking, because that's kind of his big area of his specialism as well. So, and then my dad used to do a lot with me training wise. He'd come out running with me in terms of he'd ride we lived on a farm, my parents still do, and he'd come out on the quad and follow me whilst I'm running around the hills and doing all my training and stuff. So yeah, it was a good effort from everyone.
I'm not gonna lie. I feel like that was a movie scene that I've seen where it's like you get that rise over the top, and then you just see you running over the little hill. Dad coming. All right, let's go. Let's go. To the right.
Yeah.
Oh man. So and I know, especially within the States, how much the support does help, especially when you have it with your family. Because here, obviously, most people, at least especially, don't know what rugby is. They might have heard of it, they might have experienced a connection of a connection for it, but whenever they're able to watch it through their sibling or their child or anything like that, that's usually the first initial experience with it. So being able to get that a bit of support early on, I mean, helps so tremendously in being able to push forward, right, within the community.
Without the support of my family, it wouldn't have been possible at all, because where we live was really rural as well. So I was so reliant on them to drive me everywhere, and I know mum and dad were always just like, well, whatever, if you want to do it, we'll make it happen for you. We'll get you there, and as providing you're working hard and you're doing everything you can do to be the best that you can be as well. So they would drive. Worcester was a 45-hour journey, so they would be taking me there training, because that was the best club for me at that point. And without their support and their travel and all the rest of it, it wouldn't have been possible.
So I love that, and it leads me to my next question, which was why Worcester. So I'm still always trying to understand exactly how the club culture works in the UK versus the US, because obviously very different in the aspects. The way that your positioning was, did you have a series of options where you could have gone to play, or was this one of those situations where the team was either the best that's available there, or you already had a familial connection to that specific team, and that's why you ended up going there?
Yeah, a couple of things. Like my brother had played there at Worcester as well, so there was a connection there. But to be honest, at that point, it was location. It was the nearest club for me to be able to access. Anywhere else, I'd have been traveling hours and hours. And at that point, I went to Worcester. I went to Worcester University as well because I studied to be a teacher there. So it kind of just made sense for me to be at Worcester and to stay at Worcester. And then once I was there, I just obviously fell in love with the club and really enjoyed being there and stayed there all my pretty loyal to Worcester. Stayed there all my rugby career. And
Yeah, I found that seems to be really elemental to the club system. You tend to, once you become an alumni of that club in some way, shape, or form, you kind of stick with it thoroughly. Obviously, you went deeper into it in terms of career, but like there always seems to be that resonating effect for you. Like outside of the obvious camaraderie of the team, what was it that just made that team so special for you, where you're just like, yo, this is my life here in some essence?
Yeah, I think Worcester was one of those clubs where we were probably always seen as sort of like underdogs as well. London was very much captured a lot of the international players at that time when I was playing, especially. A lot of players went there. It was kind of from a training perspective. There was a lot of other internationals there, but there's a couple of us we chose to stay at Worcester, and so when you kind of get that underdog mentality where you're all just fighting kind of for one another. We all lived local to Worcester as well at that point. So we created some really good connection, like on and off the field, which was really special. And then, and that kind of continued and developed culturally, like at Worcester. And I think at that point as well, there wasn't a huge amount of movement in the Premiership when I was playing because there wasn't the money. Like now it's a bit different because there's obviously money involved. So, but at that point there really wasn't money. So you kind of went where you knew you would be happy and you could develop as a player.
There's wheat flour that you can eat. My name is GiftTime in Baylor. I'm here with Health Enhanced Foods. And I want to tell you about one of our best and most beloved products, our sweet white wheat baking mix. Now, this is the baking mix for those who are not really looking for something that's gluten-free, but they are looking for something that they can eat that is going to still be healthy and is not going to be dangerous. White flour is typically a very processed, incredibly bleached flour, and it's not good for you. It's incredibly cheap for a reason. Our sweet white wheat bread mix is whole grain, dairy-free, high in dietary fiber, free of additives, and is absolutely unprocessed and unrefined. With our sweet white wheat bread mix, you can feel like you're getting all the same rewards that you would get from poor white bread, but with all the nutritional value. You're able to still make your bread loaves or your cakes, your flat bread or your cookies, but you don't have to feel like you are going to be robbing yourself of good carbohydrates. You can get the sweet white wheat bread mix from healthenhancedfoods.com. Absolutely go impress your friends and family with the greatest bread while not making them feel like they have to be gluten-free at the same time. No dangers, full body pleasures. Go ahead and get yours today. Let's go.
No, and it makes sense. Again, much more of the amateur style that most of us end up entering into rugby as before, the split. Not as if professional has been around even that long. 30 years is nothing comparatively. So even within that, but I do like the fact that there seems to be this lineage of options that came out of that area that attaches to the club. For you, because a central theme that I'm hearing consistently that comes from you is teaching mentorship. Like, and obviously you trained to be a teacher. Teaching has been so key to everything. Like, when you look at a club like that, do you feel like, outside of obviously that again, that community feeling, but that spirit of wanting to teach, is that something that you feel is an exception to the norm, or was a norm that was just done highly in comparison to maybe other clubs that might happen around the country?
Yeah, it's difficult to compare it to what was happening at other clubs around the country at that time, because you're not in those other clubs, so you can kind of only really judge what you find at your club. And I just found there was a great deal of care for each other. People really care for one another. I suppose it kind of became a bit of a family feel for me, because at one point my dad was coaching at Worcester as well. He coached the forwards. And then later on in my rugby career, my husband also helped coach at Worcester. So that was a real like family connection for me as well. And my sister played with me at Worcester. So for me, there was a lot of like kind of all of those connections. And it was a genuine like care for people to be better and to develop people. And I think that's kind of then lent itself to how I've developed myself as a coach as well. Over the years.
No, I love it. I love, my goodness, you guys really did make this a whole family. Like you guys are a legacy at this place. Oh man. So I'm gonna jump forward before I jump back, because there's some stuff in the middle. But obviously everything that happened in Worcester, with at least the men's side, with the bankruptcy and having to fold. How significant is that personally? And let me preface it like this. From the outside looking in, there's always been a question that goes about the business of rugby, that there is a very strong weakness, I think, that happens in the business of rugby globally. I don't think it's specific to any location. I think globally there has been within the culture. But obviously Worcester, London Irish, Wasp, they felt it in the most immediate way. And even now, in Super League, Melbourne Rebels, etc., like that. For at least a personal affect, what is it that Worcester, the loss of Worcester, has on the community effect? And then maybe if you can, what the loss of that does from a professional standpoint, in terms of how that impacts the rest of the community as well.
Yeah, it's absolutely huge. And this is the hard thing about it. Like, Worcester's been around for a long time, so you can't underestimate the impact it has. And the community in Worcester at the time, and the work that they were doing to engage young people and to get young people to games and get going out into schools. And there was all these connections, as well as the fact that historically generations had come and watched Worcester and been Worcester supporters. And I think for me, like I looked after, we have our local team, Clee Hill, which has a mini section that myself and my husband helped out at and supported. And when you were speaking to those young girls there and those young people there, they used to come along to our games, and all of a sudden it was like, who do they now support? Who do they aspire to? Who are their role models now? Because that was so accessible to them. And we used to take them to games, and they'd be the guard of honor, and they'd run out with the team, and they felt really connected to that club. So it was just not only the professional impact on the game, but the impact it had on the community, and kind of that was a really, really hard thing to see happen.
And yeah, I can imagine, again, whenever it's central, just even in the fact when you say this was the closest one that was to me and I'm an hour away, like I can imagine just that ease of centralization with connecting all these communities around just that area, let alone the Worcester specific area, can impact it. But also on the other side, maybe even pragmatically, and obviously you have some experience from an administrative side. Was it something that felt like it was an inevitability? And what I mean by that is, obviously there was a history, obviously you have time, but like, was it something that you could start to see, man, it feels like we're pushing out, but there's something not coming back in this, like maybe not the culture changing, but the environment or the requirement to be able to maintain is changing now, and we're not getting the same return that we did in the past? And was this something that you could see, or was it just like, you know, you ignore it or you just don't see it, and all of a sudden you're at this folding.
Yeah, I think the issue is in the UK, just around, it was very, very reliant on people with rich owners to come in and to support clubs. And then when COVID happened, that had a real impact on clubs, and obviously financially, the doors closed, people didn't come in and watch, and that then had that in itself had a big impact. And I know it had a big impact at Worcester when all of a sudden the gates closed and you weren't bringing in any money. And then obviously from an owner's perspective, if they're starting to struggle with their other businesses, then it doesn't become viable. And it's just a real shame then, because you know your outgoings are way more, and the salaries that are paid to, you know, especially in the men's game, are high. So, you know, to sustain that became really challenging. So you could see after COVID, a lot of these clubs were really struggling to find and get back into a space where they could continue. And unfortunately that, yeah, some of them didn't, and Worcester being one of them. So it was really, it was super hard to see.
Man, I can imagine. I'm sorry for that, by the way. You know, so here's where I go back to the jump back again. You know, as you entered into your playing career, you know, the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, you know, 98, you know, Women's Rugby World Cup is 7 years old. There's been 2 of them. You know, by 2006, I feel like there was a pretty strong establishment in that. For you, what have you seen from when you played, especially after the 2000s? I want to say specifically after the 2000s, how much has changed from the women's game and the attention from 2000s when you were playing to, let's say 2020, let's say to 2017. Because 2021 is a COVID year. I don't even know if we can really count that in totality, but like 2025 is its own thing. But, you know, from there to maybe more recent times, how has the play of women's rugby changed from your perspective?
Yeah, well, I think that obviously the crowds that are watching, and you look in England most recently, and you've got kind of 50 or 1,000 people coming to games and stuff, and that's incredible, and that's amazing to see. So, and the crowds that come, it's like families, young children, it's like such an awesome atmosphere, and that's created by that. So I think that the crowds is a huge one in terms of, you know, and right now with the next World Cup just around the corner, you can see already the interest starting to gather. And I think it's going to be a pretty special World Cup in 25 in England, because, you know, they're really getting behind that. So that's really cool. But then just the kind of everyone, you were professional without being professional. Like back when I played, so we did all the training and we worked hard, but we didn't necessarily get, obviously, the pay, which meant that we were working and you didn't have that opportunity to rest and recover to really kind of make the games that players get to make now. Whereas now, obviously, a lot of teams are professional, so they have an opportunity to do all the training, but then to rest, recover, to eat the right things, to do the analysis. So you can really see the game has pushed on, and the level of athleticism that's in the game now is obviously greater than it was back then.
Would you have wanted to play in this era, or do you feel like, you know what, I felt great for where I was? Like I you know, this is where I was able to thrive, and then I'm glad that they've been able to step up from there.
Oh, look, you know, I feel really fortunate to have played in an era where actually I got to play with some amazing people that they were like the sort of first, you know, these first amazing role models and pioneers of the game, to the likes of Jill Burns that I crossed over with, to then actually kind of almost transitioning more into a more professional era. And I finished with Sevens, where we were traveling the world. And so I kind of feel fortunate. The era I came through was quite a transitional era in itself, and got to play with some amazing people, and the values of the game were so strong. And yeah, I feel lucky to have played then, and now I feel lucky to be coaching in an era where I can make it a full-time job.
No, I love that. I love that. So, and I once again, you know how to set me up on the transitions without realizing you set me up in the transitions. Because now when it comes to the coaching side of it, obviously you retired out in 2009. Literally, as the Olympics gets announced for rugby, you said, "All right, this is where I need to step out aside from it." But you go into coaching, and the history that you have between Worcester, Exeter, working with the England team. What was the transition like going from player to coach? Because I have friends who have been able to go from being a captain for a Rugby World Cup team, and they played the high level, and then almost the next year they started moving into coaching, and there was almost this flip that just took a lot longer because there's such a different mindset that goes with it. But you were training as a teacher already. So like that transition for you, how was that? Was it still a rough one, or was it one of those where it was like, this made sense and it was, easier said than done?
Yeah, I think, like you say, because of my teaching background, and I trained to be a teacher, and I was a teacher when I was playing. So in some ways that kind of made it an easier transition. I also made the choice to move from Worcester to Exeter because I think it's really hard. Like, had I stayed in Worcester, I probably would have ended up kind of going into maybe coaching there, and then you end up coaching your peers and people you played with, which I think is really challenging in itself because it's a different relationship that you have. So I made the choice. Me and my husband at the time, both then moved to Exeter, and I didn't get a teaching job down there initially, so started coaching, and that's when I went into coaching fully. And I didn't know anybody in the area, so to start then coaching at Exeter Uni was just the perfect transition for me because one, Exeter were really, really supportive of me. Keith Fleming, who was the director of rugby at the time, was really supportive of me. I had both my kids down there, and I used to take them along to training, and they used to be kind of pitch side with me and stuff. And the uni were really supportive of that. And I kind of allowed me to, in a safe space, develop myself as a coach early on because there wasn't huge amount of pressure on results from a uni perspective. It was more about, at that point, developing players, and then as we progressed, we started to do well. But it was just a great stepping stone for me to start my coaching journey.
No, I like that because it is tough, especially whenever I like how you said the possibility of coaching peers, which I know as a person who is highly resistant to authority, that would be very difficult for my teammate who we were just like going to socials and playing with, now being the one to tell me, "Hey man, do it." I would make it easy, but they're still in the back of the mind. It's like, I literally have seen you for years and be crazy reckless. So I'm glad that you had that palate cleanser essentially to be able to formulate in there. But within that time period, obviously, it was Exeter. Obviously, you said it's uni and it was more development. But within a university system, was Exeter a team that had a history of winning, or was this just kind of like they have the history of maintaining a team and it's very blase blah, but willing to give you what you need to?
No, I think they were transitioning too, especially in the women's space. They were a really successful men's program. They had a really successful and a lot of players that played in that. And then the women's was something they were looking to push. And whilst I was there, like my role kind of went from sessional to more of a full-time role. And we went from like having one team to sort of basically like a third team that was development. And then as we developed, we started to attract kind of more senior players. So I had the likes of people like Amber Reid there, that was a Red Rose at the time. So you'd have from Amber Reid to players that had never played the game before. And then, so that from a coaching perspective was just, a great challenge because, how do you stretch this end, but also keep developing this end? So it really challenged you as a coach. And then we went on to be successful, and we had back-to-back Bucks wins at Twickenham and stuff. So it was a great place to be. And whilst there, that's when I took on the under-20s role with England at the same time.
Don't you love a great ketogenic family? My name is GiftTime. I'm here with Health Enhanced Food. I wanted to talk to you about one of our top baking mixes, and that is our ketogenic baking mixes. We got a ketogenic seed baking mix, our ketogenic almond baking mix, and of course, our ketogenic coconut baking mix. Now, what is so important about it being ketogenic? Now, for those who don't know, ketogenic means that it is utilizing low carbs to be able to eat from. The point of it is so that your body will naturally activate burning from your fat and be able to sustain off your proteins rather than feeding your body carbohydrates and your body simply burning that and you just don't lose weight. And so whenever you're doing that process, it's incredibly difficult. And of course, you're always going to have a craving for wanting to eat the breads and the carbs that you typically would have. With our keto baking mixes, you can have the pancakes, the waffles, the cookies, the cakes, the pizza crust that you absolutely desire without sacrificing the work, your diet, and obviously the results that you are trying to get. All our ketogenic baking mixes are gluten-free, grain-free, plant-based, and absolutely loaded with natural vitamins and minerals. We want to make sure that they are low net carb, they have no added sugar, they are protein rich, they have good healthy fats, but even more importantly, they have a low glycemic level. So for those who are diabetic and you're also still trying to find something, we have the baking mixes that are for you. And I'm sure you're wondering, why make 3 versions of them if they all are basically doing the same thing? Well, we wanted to make sure, as always, that we are trying to specialize to your dietary need. So with our ketogenic coconut, we wanted to give you a version that allows you to have a sweeter bread without sacrificing your diet. But it provides you things that you can make with your cakes, you can make your cookies, but you can be able to not have to lose your mind trying to find things that can satiate the taste without ruining your diet. With our ketogenic almond baking mix, that is one that has probably the highest protein content. It allows you to be able to control your blood sugar levels, reduce your blood pressure, lower cholesterol levels, and of course, it goes to promoting weight loss and being able to control the hunger. And for our ketogenic seed, this is for those who have a nut allergy and they can't take anything like the almonds. So we want to give them still the same thing. You can still make your bread, you can still make your pizza crust, you can still make your cakes and your buns and your muffins, but you don't have to worry about having an allergic reaction. You definitely can go check out the ketogenic line of products at healthenhancedfoods.com. Go ahead, keep up with your diet, get the foods that are necessary to keep you going, and let's get the results that you absolutely deserve. Let's go.
No, I love that. Speaking on those Bucks wins, for you as a coach, then now being able to see the building of a program to being able to see it achieve what we consider the ultimate goal of that program to win a championship in essence. And I'm assuming Bucks are a championship because I actually don't know what a Bucks is,
Yeah.
but I'm assuming it's a champion. Okay, good. Yeah. What were the things, and even then more so whenever you were doing with the U20s and then with the Women's Six Nations, what were the elements of a championship winning team that you learned, what the characteristics to make a championship winning team that you gained? Because, again, everybody can coach, but to coach for the top is a completely different kind of session. So from what you had experienced, what did you notice from that?
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, isn't it? Because from my perspective, it's always about developing the person as well as the player. And I didn't ever go away from that. So especially in that university setting, supporting them as people, because they've got a lot going on. Some of them, it's the first time away from home. They've got a lot of stresses. They're trying to balance their studies with training. And we had quite a demanding schedule at that point in terms of our training as well. And actually, so the more we spent supporting them, the more we would get from them on field from a training perspective. So for me, it was always about developing that individual, and then the success would come, because we weren't favorites going into those finals. We had very few senior kind of players at that point that were playing in Prem or internationally, and the team we came across did. But there was a genuine connection as a group that we'd worked really hard to create. And for me, the culture and the connection that we created got us those wins. And they just kind of they believed in each other and they believed in the work that they'd done. So that was probably what allowed us to go on and win.
Oh, I like that. Do you feel like there was a point where it went from developing players into character to finding players with character that you work as a person? Or do you think that it is possible? Maybe not possible is the wrong word I'm looking for, but is you can find players that might be the best talent that might need to be developed as people, might need to get character change? Or did you start trying to find players that might have been talented or had a little talent, but the character of the person was the primary focus that you wanted to do to bring them onto your team?
Yeah, I think at uni it's different, because you cater for everybody. So it's not like it's a recruitment thing and you're going out. I was mindful of, from a recruitment perspective, especially towards the end, because we were attracting more players. So I was conscious of also getting the right people there, like especially when I moved to Worcester and recruitment became a bigger thing in terms of getting the people in the room that fitted the way we wanted to play and culturally who we were, because it wasn't a fit for everybody. So I was very mindful of the people we were recruiting as well as the players at that point, because it was a slightly different situation to the university one.
No, and that makes sense. That makes sense. Again, you're trying to set a culture, so you want to be able to get those people that can fit into it regardless. And then everything else can kind of work facilitated in of itself. Yeah. Obviously you had this great career of coaching within the UK, but what made this Wallaroos situation pop up for you? Like, what was the decision that went, I have achieved what I needed to do here in the UK, this place that's been my home for life. I have basically done everything I needed to. And obviously, I have my home club, regardless of what the situation was. What was the decision that you made, or that came to it, that was like, okay, maybe I need to go look at this Australia situation?
Yeah, so the timing of it was around when Worcester folded. And somebody said to me and shared it with me and said, would you consider this? And my initial thoughts were, I was really struggling after the Worcester situation on a mental perspective. It was a real tough time to work so hard at a club to then have it fold, like the way in which it did. And then it was interesting because I spoke to the high performance manager at the time before the interview to get a better understanding for it. And everything he said, I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And then decided to put an application in, and then went through a process of 3 interviews for the role. And after at each stage, I kind of became more excited about it, mainly because I really enjoyed developing something. Like at uni, we developed a program that was really sustainable. At Worcester, we went there and it was all about creating pathways for the club as well. And the same with the 20s around the cultural side. So I kind of saw there was so much potential and growth in what Australia were trying to do with the Wallaroos. And it was kind of starting, like you say, there hadn't been a full-time coach before. They were a team that was looking to develop themselves. So it it was just a really kind of, I looked at it and thought, God, like there's so much opportunity here to develop these players, and one that excited me.
And in addition to that, obviously we all have our professional ambitions, but then with the family, even for me, you know, as I do rugby journalism and continue to build out and talk, you know, you always have your family in the back who has their establishment and figuring out how to maneuver from there. How was the decision with the family? Obviously, you have 2 kids, obviously your husband. How was the decision of being like, we're going from the UK all the way down under to Aussie land? You know, like what was that conversation like as well?
Yeah, my husband was aware from the off about the application. It was him that actually said, put the application in, give yourself time to think. We didn't tell the kids until I got the job, because it didn't feel like something I wanted to kind of put on them until it was happening. So yeah, my husband was super supportive, and the kids saw it and were like, and yes, it's been a bit of a roller coaster. It is, when you change, and it's not all sunshine and roses and smooth sailing by any stretch. But on the whole, like, they fully embraced coming here. They're at school here now. They go to the local rugby club, and and they're enjoying this. And for me, it was as much about an opportunity for us as a family to create memories somewhere else, to just try something different. So yeah, it was very much a family decision. When all said and done, it needed to be the right thing for all of us, and we kind of felt like it was.
No, I love that. I know you have to go soon. I got just a couple more questions for you, and then I'll let you go on it. But with the situation with Australia, like, it's pretty well known that rugby union in Australia has suffered very tremendously over the years, over the last few years, particularly after COVID. And you've started to see this constriction. Rugby league has really shot up as a component of the country, the rugby component. But within the women's side, there's still such a high level of expectation and development. For you, despite what has been happening, what was the acute opportunity that you saw that Rugby Australia presented to you, that you were like, this is not a situation that is lost yet? Because again, you just came off of Worcester, and that's a tough one. And Australia, by all definitions, is falling in that same direction. What gives you that confidence where you're just like, no, this is we can achieve this, we can retrieve this?
The people, as much as anything, the people that I've met here, the people that are driving the program, the players themselves as people, like, they are working so hard. They want to be successful, and like, that becomes, that kind of contagious feeling of like, there's no lack of talent in Australia at all. The challenge comes from the various other codes that pull on that talent. So obviously rugby league being one of them, and that's a challenge. But for me, the people that I'm working with, that makes me think that there's a big opportunity here to grow, because there's so many people that want what's best for this, for these players, and that you can see how hard the players are working for it. So I think that makes a massive difference to how you feel about the role.
And do you feel that because Australia also has a very unique cultural situation, you have people like the First Nation, you have Pollies, you have obviously English-based Australians that are there. So you have this intermixing of various cultures that are very different than you. I mean, I'm not saying the UK isn't diverse, but there is a general culture that you have that's the UK culture versus Australia, that there is this segmentation. How have you felt, or maybe even tried to prepare yourself to be able to navigate through those cultural elements so that you can create that cohesive team that is able to compete for gold, compete for championships?
I think that's one of the things that I absolutely love about this team, is the diversity in it. It's so fascinating, and to see the dynamics and the diversity of the group. I find that just amazing, and how you can bring so many different people from so many different areas together collectively, and to see how respectful and of each other they are. Like I really enjoy that, and just trying to kind of get to know them as people and their different cultures is something that is super exciting. And I think when you connect that can be really powerful, and that can be really successful. So yeah, I think it's one of the things that makes Australia and the Wallaroos really unique.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Joe, I want to thank you so much for just being able to sit down, take the time. Obviously, you guys have WXV, and the best of luck on that. Though I'm not gonna lie, I'm a US fan, so I was a little happy that we did beat you guys. It was very color. But that being said, I love what you are looking to do. I love what it sounds like your vision is set up for. And obviously the best of luck on it. How can people, if not get in touch with you, but how can people find you, follow you, see your journey, and especially the journey of the Wallaroos themselves?
Yeah, so I think most of the Wallaroos, I'm not great on social media myself, so, and I'm not particularly exciting either to follow. So, but yeah, definitely follow the Wallaroos girls. They've got some great content coming out. We will have great content coming out through WXV through our media team. So definitely go on and follow the Wallaroos.
Man, okay, I love it. I love it. Thank you again so much, and I look forward to having you on here again, because I definitely have a part 2 for all this that I want to be able to do.
Cool, awesome. Thank you so much.
Yo, I want to say thank you to Joe for taking the time to talk with me and to be able to tell her story. Absolutely love it. Look forward to seeing what you and the Wallaroos do for this year and the coming seasons afterwards. And for the rest of y'all, thank you so much for taking the time to spend time with us, to listen, to be able to take in new stories. I hope you learned something. I hope you gained something. I hope you experienced something in your own actions. And I hope you continue to be able to return, tell your friends about it, tell your family about it, tell the people that you think that could use it about it. And if you can't even share it on social media, truly appreciate it. I hope you have a great one. I hope you take care of yourself. But most importantly, I hope that you know that I hope you're happy. I hope that you're healthy. And I hope that you know that you are truly highly favored. Till next time, y'all. Cheers.